Just to preface, I think Williamsburg has a lot of weird stuff going on due to a number of factors. It's old as hell, former Indian territory, and it's close to Camp Peary, CIA base. I'm going to try to go through things in chronological order, but I'll save some of the explicitly weird things for the end. The earliest explicitly weird memory I have from Williamsburg happened the year my family moved there, so early middle school for me, and was fairly benign, but definitely weird. We were dicking around in colonial Williamsburg, which is the historical section of the town. Bunch of old buildings and people in costume yelling at you for dressing in odd attire. My father and I had gone into one of the larger buildings that wasn't regularly visited by tourists, just to look around. I went to the second floor of the building while my father remained on the first. Going up the stairs, I heard what sounded like a woman lecturing or giving a presentation, so being a nosy bastard, I went to investigate. Despite my best attempts to channel the spirit of Sherlock Holmes, I could not pinpoint where the voice was coming from. Despite checking every room I thought it could have come from. It seemed to bounce from room to room, almost like it was evading me. Eventually, I got spooked by this and went to find my father, who claimed to have heard the voices as well, but on the first floor instead. At this point, we were both freaked out and left. When we got out of the building and met back up with the rest of my family, my mother was fucking pissed and claimed we had been in the building for nearly an hour and that my father had not answered any of her calls. We were sure it hadn't been more than 15 minutes, but sure enough, a whole hour had passed. This instance was fairly benign, and I promise later events get much weirder and spookier. It's more just an example of the stories most families have surrounding colonial Williamsburg. I'm going to eat. I'll be back up in about an hour to continue if the thread is still up. Thanks for the bump and the interest. Should be able to bang out the rest now, so just bear with me. Second occurrence was realistically a nothing burger, but still scared the fuck out of me at the time. Neighborhoods in the suburban south are mostly new developments of tightly packed homes with a central clubhouse or pool or something. They suck if you want any privacy or to own the land, but they are great if you're a family with kids because you will be surrounded by other families with kids. Plenty going on, and you can just dump your kids outside without having to worry about much. I lived in one of these neighborhoods. On the bus ride home one day, an older kid was telling me and my friend about this supposedly haunted place called the Sawmill. It was only a couple of miles away from our neighborhood. We grabbed supplies after the bus dropped us off and made our way to the Sawmill with the older kid as our guide. This place was in some relatively deep woods that surrounded our neighborhood, and admittedly, we got lost as fuck. After about an hour of romping around the woods, we came upon a clearing and could see the outline of a large, warehouse-type building. Upon entering the clearing, the clouds opened up on us with the fervor of a Buffield piss. Because of this, we agreed to leave. In reality, we were all super scared and didn't want to be murdered or assaulted by whatever demon lived in the sawmill. We jogged back to our neighborhood, and I vividly remember feeling like I was being watched the entire time. The second we returned to civilization, the rain stopped, which justified my feeling that we should not be there. Turns out the place was a pretty active homeless camp that ended up getting busted up by the police, I assume, as it was abandoned by the time I went back in high school. The sawmill was actually quite cozy, and me and my friends would regularly get high there. Like I said, it was a nothing burger. The last text box bugged out from me and wouldn't let me continue typing, so the picture of the cookout was supposed to be for the story. We've reached high school, which is where the good stuff starts happening, but the early expeditions into the unknown did not yield much. To establish our cast, all of the following events include members of my very, very tight-knit friend group, 8 guys in total, and I still talk to most of them regularly, if not daily. The first place we went to was an abandoned building, bank or motel, I can't really remember which, that was behind the cookout on the edge of town. This was really stupid, as it was a known hangout for homeless addicts. Luckily, we weren't accosted by any dope fiends and just dicked around, trying to get inside for an hour or so. Pick related as Crawford Bridge. It was either on the edge of Williamsburg or Yorktown, cannot remember which, and can't be fucked to look it up. The place is spooky as fuck, but popular, which really reduces the spook factor. Allegedly, some woman and her child were lynched here sometime following the war. If you parked under the bridge and turned your car off for a minute or two, handprints would show up all over the exterior. We went here 3 times. One time, a single handprint showed up. But honestly, I never felt anything super malevolent in this place. And because there were always a bunch of gnomey ghost hunters, we stopped going once we had found better places. Another instance, we parked at the bridge and explored the woods and fields surrounding the area. It was a nearly moonless night and foggy as fuck, so we got lost to an impressive degree. Not crazy, but I was quite uncomfortable in a certain field that had a hill overlooking it. Constantly felt like I was being watched. Alright, sorry for lame stories so far. I just want to be comprehensive. Next post, we'll get into the good stuff. I'm going to snag some satellite photos and do some paint magic to assist in describing stuff, so give me a bit. Alright, we're finally to the good stuff. These events happened in my junior and senior years of high school. Eastern State Mental Hospital was the first mental institution in the United States. It has gone through many periods of closure and rebuilding. Currently, it is partially open, but a large section was entirely abandoned in the 70s, I believe. Date could be wrong, but it is unimportant. I have attached a poorly labeled map as a reference. There were alleged patient mistreatments in the past, including abuse and lobotomies. Really all the good stuff. Everyone in town agrees that it is haunted as fuck, and it is terrifying at night. Initially, my friends and I broke into the building, labeled early visits. We entered the side facing the woods, through the window we forced open. The interior of the building is in terrible condition and quite dangerous. Ceiling panels fall, there's broken glass everywhere, and the walls all have asbestos in them. Nothing too significant happened in here, although I have heard voices and whisperings throughout the building that 2 of my friends confirmed also hearing. We mostly just stole stuff and set off fire extinguishers while we were in there, as our fear quickly subsided following our first couple of visits. The building labeled church on the map was a large structure that resembled a church, but we're not sure if it actually was one. It took us many attempts to gain entry to this one, but eventually we managed to force open a door. This building was our introduction to an odd trend in Eastern State, the juxtaposition and levels of decay inside of buildings. The interior of the building was in pristine condition. There were even papers with employee records and newspapers that remained intact. Not much happened in this building either, and we only entered once. Finally going out of order, but I figured I would continue on the trend of buildings in good condition. One night, me and 2 others were traipsing throughout the property. I jokingly tried the doorknob of one of the buildings we had previously attempted to get into. To our surprise, it opened without resistance, and we excitedly entered. This building, like the church, was untouched on the inside. Unlike the church, this building had previously held patients. The atmosphere inside was incredibly oppressive, as all of the surfaces inside were white and devoid of dust or mold, the norm for these buildings. The building itself was a single level. The door we entered through opened to a long hallway with rooms where the patients were kept on either side. We would call this building the children's ward, as there were drawings and scrawlings on the walls and tack boards throughout the rooms, which appeared to have been done by children. I wish we'd explored this one more, but between the state of the building, the drawings, and the threat of being locked inside the building should the door not open again, we were all quite freaked out and left within half an hour. This building is not marked on the map. I cannot find it on Google Earth. I'm going to cover encounters we had with security and the police now, as I want to save the events of Building 4 for last. For the record, my friends and I were incredibly cautious when on the property. The last thing any of us wanted was to get arrested. Because of this, we had a set of rules, which honestly just amounted to always staying with the group, never pointing flashlights anywhere except the floor to avoid shining them outside of windows, not using flashlights outside, and, in the event that we were seen or some fuck shit went down, bolting in different directions and meeting at a classy strip mall called Newtown that was a few miles away. The first encounter we had was in building number 4. which I've attached a photo of. I'm going to skip describing the building, because I want to save that for describing the things we experienced inside the building. We were on the second floor, and noticed multiple flashlights being shined through the windows. As a result, we promptly dipped and fled to the woods. From there, we watched figures scouting around the building. Realistically, these guys were just security. Events similar to this started happening often near the end of our senior year, and culminated in the next described encounter. The second run-in we had was incredibly odd, and the last time we went to Eastern State. At this point, we were pretty apprehensive of any criminal trespass due to an unrelated encounter with police where we were almost arrested and security being beefed up on the property. We had been on the property for less than 10 minutes, and we were making our way down the road to Building 1, pictured on the ghetto-ass map above. The abandoned section was at a lower elevation than the active section, and as a result, once you made your way down there, you could not see any activity coming down the roads in your direction. It was an incredibly dark night, and we noticed the flash of headlights on the hill behind us. We figured it was just someone passing through, as the chances of security already being alerted were incredibly slim. However, the headlights grew alarmingly bright as they barreled down the hill at us, and we ran into the woods south of the road and were separated. I went prone about 10 feet into the tree line to watch the vehicle, which was a truck with a large searchlight mounted in the bed that was being manned by some, assumedly, security guard. The truck went further down the road to where my friends had entered the woods. I began making my way through the woods towards Newtown and eventually met up with a friend that I will call Clyde. I was incredibly relieved to have found him, as being in the woods alone at night is terrifying, especially when you are being hunted by security at an abandoned mental hospital. Clyde and I slowly made our way towards the nearest main road so we could get to Newtown without trespassing further. A few hundred feet into the woods, Clyde stopped and motioned for me to look at something. I scanned the gaps in the trees in front of me and noticed a large figure standing still, presumably looking back at us. I called out to the person, thinking it was someone from our group. The person responded by taking out a large flashlight and aiming it at us, at which point we both booked it. Thankfully, we made it out of the woods and were able to reach Newtown and meet the rest of our group. The actual paranormal shit that happened will be in the next one. Thanks for reading this far if you are. Building 4 is a long history. All the information I know concerning it is hearsay, although I'm sure there are articles that could give you a thorough history of the building. John Galt, the doctor who ran the place for a while, died in there due to an overdose and still walks the grounds at night. It burned down at least once, but I want to say it happened twice and was rebuilt. Allegedly, a number of people died in the fires, but I'm not sure. Our first venture into the building was incredibly tense, as we had to shimmy along the white ledge below the windows. You see it pictured a few posts back. This caused us to take nearly half an hour to get into the building, and if anyone fell, there would almost certainly be broken legs. The interior of the building was similar to the first one we entered, in that it was rotting. Unlike the first building, there were significantly more things left in this building. Beds, records, cleaning and maintenance supplies, and some old medical equipment lay strewn about. We cautiously made our way through the building, going up to the third floor and onto the roof to make sure that we were alone initially, and then into the basement. In the basement, we found a busted window which we would use for future entrances and exits. On this initial visit, I am certain that I heard laughing coming from somewhere deeper in the building, and 2 of my friends later confirmed hearing the same. Despite a general feeling of unease, nothing too bad happened to us during our initial trips. Because of this, we grew very confident in our ability to traverse Eastern State. One night, a group of 4 of us entered the building through the window we found on our first trip. The group included me and friends who I will call Smith, SV, Kevin. At this point, we had all been in the main building dozens of times and were very confident in our knowledge of the layout and everything inside. We were going from room to room, looting whatever stupid shit we could find, and SV picked up a long metal rod. Will be important later. We worked our way to the middle of the basement, at which point Smith called out to us, saying he had found a long hallway. I questioned this, as we had thoroughly explored all of the buildings at this point and had never seen this hallway. But sure enough, he was correct. The hallway was deep enough that our shitty flashlights could not reach the end of it, so we began to make our way down it. The hallway was odd in a number of regards. First, in that it was on a noticeable downward slope, which we had not experienced in any other building. Second, it was completely barren. And third, in that once we got about 50 feet in, we realized it had flooded slightly. Despite this, we continued on, as the water was only up to about ankle height at its deepest. After minutes of walking, we reached a point where our flashlights could hit the end of the path. We froze dead place as we saw a figure at the end of the hallway, and as soon as we snapped out of our initial fear, we turned and sprinted back to the beginning of the hall. We reached the doorway and stopped to catch our breath. We confirmed what each of us had seen, and decided that someone must have set up a mannequin to scare people. Because of this, we turned and made our way back through the hallway until we reached the same point as before. The figure was facing away from us, staring straight at the wall in front of it, and had not moved an inch since we last saw it. It had long hair and was dressed in a shirt and pants. After a minute or two of staring, SV spoke up and yelled, "If you don't move, I'm gonna hurl this javelin, shitty metal rod, at you." The figure responded by turning 90 degrees at an inhumanly fast rate and crawled onto the wall. At this point, we ran from the hallway all the way back to our car, which was easily 2 miles away. That was easily the most intense fear I've experienced in my life, and if I go the rest of my life without matching it, I will be a happy man. The next week we got our whole group together and headed back. We made our way to the end of the hallway again, and found that the figure had crawled into a small tunnel. Being dumb and adventurous, we climbed in single file and made our way on hands and knees. What we found was a tunnel system that went on for at least a mile and connected many of the abandoned buildings to one another. Sadly, we were unable to explore it in as much depth as we would have liked to, as the truck encounter happened a few weeks after this, and we decided to stop exploring as we would graduate soon. In total, Williamsburg is a fantastic place to live and raise a family, but there is an innumerable amount of oddities and paranormal spots throughout the town. Thanks for reading. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. Hey, I hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you do and you want to hear more, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment down below, as it lets the algorithm know that you like my content and it promotes it to more people. My goal for the channel is to hit 50,000 subscribers, and we're closing in fast, so thank you, and back to the stories. Strange accounts from deep-sea divers that suggest there is more at play under the ocean than what we might actually be aware of. There are so many accounts from deep-sea divers about strange things that you could not even begin to imagine, and almost always go unreported and are covered up so that the masses don't freak out due to the possibility that some strange things could be living under our feet, possibly alien species. Whether these things are being covered up to avoid a freakout, or because the government has a hand in some nasty experiments, it is not totally clear. A very early encounter that dates back to the 1880s happened in Loch Ness in Scotland. Yes, that famous place. The Loch Ness Monster is only one out of many reports that were reported to be sighted there. All of them were waved away as hallucinations or people trying to get their 15 minutes of fame due to the Loch Ness Monster legend. No one ever took them seriously. Diver who was called Duncan MacDonald, sent to investigate a shipwreck at the Caledonian Canal entrance. Just a routine dive. Conditions were completely clear. Things instantly descended into chaos. Only a short while after descending, not even a couple of minutes passed by, MacDonald instantly sent urgent signals. He was signaling to be brought back up to the surface as quickly as possible. He was pale and frightened when he resurfaced. Would not say a word about the experience for weeks, despite being hounded for answers. Finally plucked up the courage to share his tale. Said he had seen something odd looking. Said it looked like a gigantic frog under the water. It was apparently lying on the rock ledge, and he only spotted it while examining the hull of the shipwreck. He refused to ever dive again in his life. Here's another from the same place in the year 1943. Reports were sent into a newspaper from a concerned villager. Something strange had happened to a fellow villager. Quote from the paper: "Once coming to Methven, I made the interesting discovery that one of the residents of this village also hailed from this part of Inverness Shire. After discussing persons and places, the conversation turned round to the Loch Ness Monster. I remember," he began, "how the villagers in that district used to talk about a monster being seen on Loch Ness, about 3 miles away from Invermorriston, that is, at Rikishi. The story runs that a gentleman sailing down the loch in his yacht was driven shorewards. The yacht sank and came to rest on a ledge of the rock. In order to secure some of his valuables, the owner of the sunken yacht hired the Caledonian canal diver, Honeyman by name, from the village of Clacknahary. He intimated to the assembled onlookers that he would begin work the following morning. When the coast was clear, however, the diver, thinking that he and his crew would get something for themselves, donned his diving suit and descended into the water to make inspection. When he got to the yacht, it slipped off the ledge of the rock and disappeared into the depths. But then, to the diver's intense horror, a huge beast, measuring about 9 feet long and possessing a body as stout as that of an average man, passed in front of him. Whatever it may have been, the diver, who in very truth had got the wind up, adamantly refused to descend into the water again." One more from Loch Ness, taking place in the year 1971. Sighting by a man called Robert Badger. Claims to have had an encounter with a monster within the lake. Quote from Robert Badger: "We did the job of placing the mooring, and as the others loaded the tools and dinghy back into the van, I did a bit of snorkeling so the wetsuit did not get ripped on the gear. I swam out from the small floating jetty which was there in those days. 100 yards or so from the jetty, the floor of the bay suddenly nosedives into deep water. I had just passed this point and was about 10 or 15 feet below the surface, but was now in deep water and was thinking that I should turn and go back when I saw an object in front of me. The water is of course full of peat and is like thick tea. As I got closer, I could see a top and a bottom to the object, but it extended left and right out of my vision. The surface of the object was rough textured and rounded in cross-section. I saw no protuberances in the part I could see. I'm not sure how far from the object I was, maybe 15 to 20 feet. It was moving from my right to my left, that is, towards the main lock. This sounds like a long drawn-out sighting, but in reality, it only occupied a couple of seconds. I realized what I was looking at and decided that I should not be here. I have size 13 feet, and my swim flippers are large and strong. I surfaced quickly and made for the pier as fast as I could. Simon Dinsdale's eye was caught by me surfacing, and he said I was moving so fast that I was aquaplaning on my chest. As I made my way in, I was terrified that I was being chased, but I noticed Mr. Menzies' nephews playing in a boat tied to the pier, and his black Labrador coming into the water to meet me, so I risked a look back and realized that I was alone. The next encounter is a report coming from the Pine Barrens Institute, which is part of the 14 network, if anyone is already familiar. Deep-sea diver from Australia. Took place in the year 1953. The diver was said to be very deep into the water. Suddenly noticed a huge black mass looming in the distance. It was murky, so details were hard to make out. Whatever the thing is said to have just been hovering in the current, unmoving. The diver was frozen in shock and did not know how to react to the mass. Then something even more frightening happened. A white-tipped shark swam by. It swam in front of the black mass, right by it, within touching distance almost. The shark took no notice of the thing and just swam. Then the shark froze mid-swim. Literally looked like time had stopped moving, and the shark was frozen mid-motion. Then the shark started to be pulled into the black mass. Whatever the thing was, pulled the shark in whole, and the shark disappeared completely from view. The diver said he realized, straight after this event, that he was seeing some kind of jellyfish. The diver said that the jellyfish was gargantuan and bigger than any ever recorded or seen in history. The diver said this jellyfish had stung the shark to paralyze it, and then devoured it whole. The Pine Barrens Institute made a comment that reveals how big the jellyfish must have been, according to the diver's report. Currently, the largest known jellyfish in the world is the lion's mane jellyfish. The bell diameter, the head of the lion's mane, can grow to over 6 foot 7 inches wide, while the sticky tentacles can grow up to 100 feet long. These jellyfish are found primarily within the cold waters of the Arctic, northern Atlantic, and northern Pacific Oceans. The largest specimen of lion's head washed up in Massachusetts Bay in 1870 and had a bell diameter of 7 feet and tentacle length of 121 feet. Now, could a lion's mane jellyfish be the jelly responsible for catching, killing, and eating the shark in Australia? While the LMJ is capable of growing extremely long tentacles, the bell diameter is not large enough to encapsulate and digest a full-grown white-tip shark. The generally agreed upon length of the shark is around 9.8 feet long, although a record-setting 13-foot specimen has been caught before. This would make the shark bigger than the bell of the LMJ by almost 3 feet. In order for a jellyfish to eat and digest its food, it needs to fully encapsulate the prey inside its stomach. The stomach of the jellyfish is known as the colenteron, a single cavity inside the bell which serves as not only the stomach, but also as the mouth, intestines, and anus. When the food has fully made its way inside, digestive enzymes and acids begin to break down the food, and it is then absorbed into the body. But if the food is larger than the small hole that leads inside, the jelly will release the food to drift away. This means that the jellyfish that caught and ate the white-tip shark had to possess a bell which was 12 feet or wider. In turn, this could mean the tentacles of this mysterious gigantic jelly might have been a length of over 200 feet or more. 1969, off the coast of Bermuda, 2 divers, Richard Weiner and Pat Boatwright, are in the middle of a dive when they reportedly saw a massive jellyfish-like creature. Described it as giant purplish-colored jellyfish with an almost pink outer bell rim pulsating through the water. They estimated the diameter of the bell as being almost 100 feet across in total. They fled almost instantly. I remember this happening a couple of years ago. A buddy of mine had rented out a boat for my birthday to go out to the sea with. It was going perfectly fine. The boat was super nice, good for fishing, had a great deck. When he told me he was going to rent one, I fought to order a new fin to scuba with. It was a mono fin, since I had never gotten a chance to use one. I'd been practicing with it, so it was perfect to use it out in the sea. We started to go out off the coast of the Cape, and the water was a bit chilly, but not ice cold. We were maybe 22 miles out from the coast, while still within eyesight of the shore. My friend brought fishing baits and rods for us to use later on. I was ready to get off the deck of the boat with my wetsuit and mono fin, my tank resting on my arm before I was going to dunk in. After a couple of minutes, I had this really weird chill down my spine. Not paranoia, but superstition. I brushed it off and put my tank on my back, followed by my goggles. I felt that weird superstition feeling again, but it quickly switched to paranoia when I saw a pair of glistening eyes in the ocean. At first I thought it was a shark. I've had my fair share of training for 6 years with sharks and other deep ocean water creatures, so I thought I would be able to handle this. It slowly started making its way towards me when I got a better glimpse at it. It was huge, and I mean massive. Its teeth were poking out the side of its jaw, and it even had razor-sharp fins. I know this wasn't a shark, because they have a more smooth, rubbery type of flesh. This one had scales, like a snake. Blood was pouring out of its mouth. It looked like it was ready for its next meal. I attempted to hurry, but I was in shock. I finally cut out of shock the moment it started to swim more swiftly, but the mono fin could only go so fast in the water. My buddy was getting a little suspicious that I had not come up with anything from the depths of the ocean. He looked over the boat deck and I guess could see me attempting to swim for my life as a dark shadow was inching closer. I eventually reached the boat and, out of breath, I told him to book it. We ended up not using the boat for the rest of the day and just went home. To this day, I have no idea what it was, but in all my years of experience, I don't want to find out. Lake Superior, United States, August 22nd, 2005. Diver named Todd Eli was diving at the mouth of the Duluth Ship Canal. Area is infamous for incredibly fierce currents that can drag a person away in an instant. If you get caught in one, then you will never be seen again. To help with this, a 4-foot rebar spike was hammered into the sand to serve as a signpost. It was there to help prevent people from getting lost or sucked away in the current. Quote from Todd Eli: "Outside the Great Wall of the canal, we swam over the sand for perfect visibility, 40 feet deep, lacy light bands on our bodies from the day above. But at the canal's mouth, a wall of brown silt pushed miles out into the open water, an underwater river within the lake. Whorls and eddies sprouted along its length into the distance. To swim across the breadth of it, we'd have to enter zero visibility like a zone of night. We readied our nerve and kicked into the gloom. In addition to the clicking sound of our guide line reels unwinding, I heard a thrumming sound, a guttural vibration I associated with an outboard motor sputtering on its way to starting up. We had timed our stunt to miss any cargo ship traffic. The sound was more like a pick of bone strumming thick tendons. It was biological and contained menace. Something heavy and fast bumped up against me. At first I thought it was maybe a dead tree pushed by the current. Whatever it was grabbed my buddy and ran with him. Our stake was dislodged, jerked from the lake bottom like a rod from the hands of an angler. My skin had been pierced, stabbed, leaving a searing puncture wound. We had cast ourselves into the stream like bait. Damn, I miss you, man. I feel terrible. This isn't even the scariest part. Todd Eli later perished from what was described as the result of an unidentified nerve venom. Autopsy report: patient died in an intense pain that defied regimens. The undocumented nerve venom displayed lytic, hemolytic, and edematous activities. Patient developed erythema, hypertension, and tachycardia. Symptoms included swelling and vomiting. Was this the work of a sea monster, or some strange type of creature underneath the lake? Interview with a World War II veteran at St. Luke's Hospital. Transcript of hospital interview with patient Drake Monroe through the speaker of the barometric chamber at St. Luke's Hospital. 3 miles from shore between the water intake pipes for Duluth and Superior. Hardy mends the boat while Johnson and I go backward into the sea with our technical diving gear. Depth of 125 feet attained. Investigating a field of the toxic waste barrels dumped in the World War II era by Honeywell, which spans into the distance in the light of our dive lights, revealing bottom muck stirred up into a cloud, suspended over and among barrels like an animated fog sloshing around. Our lights playing on the suspended haze tricked me into detecting a hint of phosphorus. Each barrel is lined with concrete and filled either with bomb parts or chemical waste. Each weighs up to 600 pounds. Using side frog kicks to avoid stirring up the sediments even more, we documented that you can see concrete through the rusted out weak spots of many barrels. Each one is evidence of corporate criminality, which we systematically catalogued against the metrics on our underwater clipboards. Perversely a fish habitat, we saw several species darting in and around the barrels like it was a weird reef. We were really just getting started when we had to wrap it up for a long, slow ascent with many decompression stops, but we decided to catalog just 5 more barrels. I was a dozen feet from him as we coordinated our activity using dive signals and writing pads. I was astonished and became petrified as an 18-foot catfish, the thing looked as big as a limousine, emerged from the silk cloud behind Johnson. Its dorsal spines erected with a low thrum as the tendon snapped the bones into place. A subsonic design as if by a demiurge to terrify prey into inaction. It opened its wide flat mouth, and the act of its opening violently sucked in a large volume of water. Johnson's legs were sucked in up to his waist, like a frog held fast by the creature's incurving teeth. Our eyes locked wide in shock and terror. The fish gulped, and Johnson disappeared into its belly, only his hand sticking out between the pale rubbery lips, dropping his clipboard, which fell among the barrels like an autumn leaf, fluttering into a graveyard. The last thing he'd written, almost done. With a little slurp, Johnson's hand disappeared into the gullet, like the end of a piece of spaghetti. The mottled green, scaleless fish flexed its fins to turn and come about, their spiny tips secreting venom. Its mucousy flesh was a sense organ tasting its environment. It must have developed a taste for the prey around the barrels, chemicals altering its endocrine system and growth rate. Now it hummed in on me. Its 4-foot whiskers trailed through the muck of the barrel field like it was licking a battery, leaving a wake of twisting contrails. The fish had a 6-foot lamprey on its side with the diameter of a rolled-up carpet. I skyrocketed to the surface, and I am recovering from the bends in this barometric chamber, although it is likely I will suffer lifelong health effects. Interviewer: a team went back with spear guns, but all they found were Johnson's scuba tanks. Monroe regurgitated like indigestible bones. This superior specimen must be related to the goonch of India, which eats grown men. There is also the lore of men eating catfish from the days of medieval Europe. I have been contacted by a prominent nature documentary series to tell my story. From the autopsy report on patient Drake Monroe, patient died of cerebral edema related to decompression sickness. The water on his brain affected his mental stability, and he died ranting and raving about sea monsters. He confided in me in his final moments that he believes Johnson's dry suit and air tanks may have enabled him to survive constricted in the creature's stomach, like an ersatz womb. From lips to stomach would have been a tight squeeze, and so may have torn his mask and air tanks off and so forth, in which case he would have been unconscious and dead within 2 or 3 minutes. But it's possible he was swallowed with his scuba rig intact, unable to move an inch, and bombarded by rows of gastric glands in the mucosal folds of the muscular stomach walls. Johnson could have lived for up to 2 hours. Finally his air ran out. Hours after that, in the belly of the beast, through the bite wounds, the space-age materials of the dry suit were compromised by the acids and ground apart by the chewing actions of rocky gastroliths. This allowed digestion of the fetal corpse. I'm in the Atlantic. Depth is about 30 to 50 feet, with a lot of pocket reefs around. I swim away from a reef to see what is in that direction. Visibility is about 40 feet. In front of me, at the surface, right at the edge of visibility, I see a massive body. What I can see is around 2 to 3 feet thick and about 6 to 10 feet long. I can only see a body. I can't see a tail or a head. It is a light silver with somewhat darker golden or brown stripes. It was only there for a second. It must have been turning to go the other direction, and I only saw a part of its body. I had never seen anything like that. I was curious and intrigued. I started to swim towards it to see what it was. I got about 12 feet in that direction when a fright came through my body. It was a primal, undeniable feeling of absolute dread and horror. My body was telling me that whatever that thing was, I needed to get the hell out of the water as fast as I could. I stopped swimming towards it and immediately pivoted back to the boat. I swam on my back so I could keep looking behind me in the direction that the thing had been. I don't know what that thing was, but it was massive. It was a giant and I was a fly. Some part of my animal brain knew what it was, and it knew that it was a danger.